I don't know if I want to see it. I heard it was supposed to be really sad.
It's the greatest anime ever! There are these 9 countries, right? And each one of them has this super shiny giant crystal called a soul future. And because they have the soul futures, everyone in the world has like these perfect happy lives. But then these monsters called voids start eating all the soul futures. Wow! And if they get all 9 soul futures, then the great void appears and ends the world. So, one by one, the voids are scarfing them all up and everybody's freaking out. It's so wild! Anyway, that's when the best warriors from all 9 countries team up to protect the last soul futures. They're called the 9 Soldiers, which is just the coolest name. And they all fight really hard to save the world from the voids. But then Luke, he...
Now, I'm going to show you the greatest discovery in history.
Wow. Welcome to the Monkey Show. I am Aru, the Monkey King of Zoolandia. And what is Zoolandia? It is an alternate version of New Zealand in a fantasy isekai universe, and where we find one of our characters, Romy, finding herself and trying to live amongst weird creatures that she finds there. But today we're going to be talking to Steve SAMEDI from America. He is the writer, creator of Vodka, well, Valley of the Kings. Steve, I was going to say Shane because I just looked at my friend's art there and I went, it's Shane. No, Steve, how are you, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm good. Thank you for having me on.
So tell us a quick, give us a bit bio about yourself, like, a couple of minutes, and then we'll ask you questions I normally ask creators. So I'm going to put you on solo, give you the stage, and...
Thank you. My name is Steve SAMEDI. Like you said, I'm a writer. I'm from New Jersey. So I am the middle child, middle of 3. I've been into comic books and just writing and stories for a long time. I used to love drawing as a kid. Always would draw in school stuff. And for a long time, I just really loved just creating. So I'm just a creative person. In general, I just like to have art around. And for the last 10 years or so, I've really gotten serious about writing. So about 10 years ago, I put out an independent novel. And then the current story I've been working on for about 5 to 6 years. So I, came up with an idea, and we can get into that. And I created the characters, and I've been developing it ever since. So, I've been working on it. I've been really coming up with the idea, and I guess this is how we're here right now.
Awesome. So I didn't know much about Steve, and we didn't talk about much about his work life and stuff until like a couple of months ago. Like, and we've been talking together, chatting and video chatting about this project for about a year. And so, do you want to give us a bit about? I mean, apart from the comics, who what you actually do and stuff, in your professional life?
Sure. So I am a mental health therapist. So I've been doing that for about 13 years, a little bit longer before I was fully licensed. And currently, I actually work in Alaska. So I live in New Jersey. I work in Alaska. So I travel there a couple times a year. And, I work in the remote areas. So I'm out in the Arctic, working with some great people.
That's pretty cool, man. Like, all I know about Alaska is, I mean, in a cool way, is because of the TV shows and also the vampire movie, by Steve Niles, right? And 40 days of night, and it was like one of my favorite vampire movies, and it's pretty cool. Like, we don't want to give away too much about what this book is, because it's kind of like one of those things that if you say too much, you'll ruin it, but you don't want to say too much. So all I put out is like, it's a sci-fi horror set in the future. But do you want to give us your version of that, and like without spoilers?
Sure. I think the story is pretty much like a post-apocalyptic story. It's really gods versus zombies. So, and really the gods are vampires who people worshipped as gods in ancient Egypt. And pretty much it's the last stand for humanity. There's one final city in Washington, D.C. that is protected by a large wall. And the story is really about survival. So the survival of the humans, the survival of the vampires, and the survival of the zombies, and kind of the humans that are stuck in the middle, and kind of how the humans and the vampires kind of have to work together because they need each other, but they don't necessarily like each other a lot. So it's a lot of drama. So I think of it as kind of a mix of like Game of Thrones with The Walking Dead and a little bit of like the Black Panther stories.
Right. So it's tell us, like we talked about how your background and how you were, been writing novels and stuff. See, I didn't even know you wrote a novel. So tell us a bit about how your childhood and how you got into comics, and the idea of becoming a writer, or how you started into writing and stuff like that.
Sure. So, I've been into like comic books and cartoons since I was a little kid. So I think the love of art started with like X-Men, the animated series. So I just loved that. And that's really when I started drawing. So I'd always sketch things randomly. If I'm in school, I'd be doodling. Even if I'm paying attention, I would be writing. But, I would always do it kind of on the side, never something I was really going to pursue. I did kind of think about that in the past, but it didn't make that much sense for me at the time. So I kind of focused on, doing the therapy thing. And then, it was always something that was in the back of my mind, and just something that always helped me, I think, kind of de-stress myself, with the serious type of work that I do. It was kind of a good escape to be able to, after the 9 to 5, I was able to kind of switch my brain onto like more creative things, and, really have that like excitement about something else that's fun and not too traumatic. So, and I guess when I really started taking writing seriously was probably around 2012. It was during the Hurricane Sandy here, and for about a week we didn't have power, and I was really bored. So then I started like thinking of things, and like that was just kind of my way of keeping myself sane. So that's kind of how I developed the original novel, was just really being bored and just coming up with the story and really kind of fleshing it out. And then with the current story, Valley of the Kings, just really came from me loving supernatural stuff, loving vampires, really loving like black vampires in particular, like Blade. So I really just wanted my own version of that story.
Right.
And then I really just love learning. So I really love ancient Egypt. And then I kind of put those together. And then I started doing a lot of research. And that's one thing I like about writing, because to be a good writer, you really have to like know a lot about things. That's also one of the reasons I wanted to explore and like go to Alaska and do things, just because as a writer, you want to have experiences that you can draw from. So
100%.
that's
Yeah.
one reason I wanted to kind of do those things. And as I was researching, I really learned a lot about just Egyptian culture, ancient Egyptian culture, and I really just kind of fell in love with it. And I just loved like the art and I just like learning about stuff. So there's just so many
Yeah.
creative connections. And as I was doing my research, I really noticed that there was a lot of connections between like Washington, D.C. and ancient Egypt. I don't think most people
Yeah.
would know that like a lot of the architecture in Washington, D.C. is based off of ancient Egypt. Like the Washington Monument is like an obelisk. So then that started getting my brain working on how I could make a story around that.
Yeah. Hey, just want to check with your tech. Have you got other things open in the background? Because you seem to every now and then you sort of clip out. Like, have you other tabs or anything like that? Because I've got everything turned off apart from us and some artwork I want to show. But like, yeah. So while you're doing that, oh yeah, we'll get back. So I wanted to show a bit of work that we've been doing, you know, with Vodka here. We've got it, you know, because we said this is a revised version, right? What we've done is we've got a brand new artist to work over across the entire 6 issues. And so with that, it means that we can, you know, we have a stable single style all the way through. So if you're going to be, you know, when you're going to see something in here, you will expect the same in issue 6 or 4 and so on. One of the things about like taking so long to do, you know, bring a project to life is that sometimes, you know, people move on and do, you know, go into other projects and stuff. So with us here, we've been able to be very, you know, very, you know, privileged to be able to, you're back, excellent. So we're very privileged to have, oh, cheers, Donita. Yeah, it was just like, there was a bit of like a tech thing happening, but hopefully this time it's cool because yeah. Anyway, so this is one of the pages that I found really cool that you know, Francisco Conti, our Italian artist, has worked on. And here's the thing about this is that like he said this is the most zombies he's ever drawn on a single page. And I was trying to count it. It's a lot, right? It's a lot. And I love this page because it's just such a brilliant setup. And of course, you know, this is the way that Steve wrote it. So I'm going to take that away for the time being and bring us back on to our main stage. Now, before you went away, Robert Trevina Jr. asks, is there any parallels? I always get that word, I tongue twisted. Parallels to real life in your story, and how? Right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I can say is when I first started working on it, there weren't. I was kind of more of the story, but I started the story a little bit before the pandemic. So as I had an initial idea for the story, but then after living through the pandemic, I was actually really able to relate to the characters like unexpectedly. Yeah. And I was actually able to shift certain things because there's a lot of relationships between families, fathers and sons, and relationships with some of the main characters. And one thing that I thought was like, I thought when something bad happened, I thought the world would act a certain way. And then after we went through the pandemic, I was like, oh, that's not how it would go in real life. So I really had to adjust that and say like, okay, I have a better idea of like how people would react in a situation that was even more dire, where there are even less people, where there's even less resources, when there's a lot less that you can work with. Now you can see like how people's true colors and what people are willing to do and not do. I was able to kind of really incorporate that in my story.
It's when you go into a situation, a dire situation, beforehand you think, oh, I'm going to be like this in the situation. I'm going to be like this. I'm going to be like that, you know. But like, you know, it's like, you know, when you go, well, I'm going to, you know, I've been in a couple situations where I've jumped in when trying to help somebody from getting their brain bashed out, right? But when I wasn't in myself, I was like survival mode. Whereas I was like jumping in for somebody else, I was like, yeah, I got you, bro. Just leave them alone. I got you. When I was in the middle of it myself, I was like, dude, don't kill me right now, because I you know, I'm only here for a week, man. Let me leave the city. You can go on with your life and I'll go on with my life. Just move on. But I think I think we learned a lot about people through COVID, and I think it's good in a way, because it showed us who we can become and who we don't want to become. And this is something like I was thinking about, like when you talk about mental health, and it's not often we talk to people with a professional background like yourself, right? Especially in comics, because a lot of people in comics are like artists. We're in our feelings. We're not about the feelings. We're in the feelings, because most of our creativity comes from how we feel at that time. We write stories based around, you know, our emotions. What is it like creating it from, you know, writing a story with a technical background like you do?
Yeah, I think being able to pull on a lot of the trauma. So I do a lot of work with trauma, and I think I have a good understanding of how that impacts people, just, you know, on the inside, and how they interact with people. And then I think being able to pull I think some of the sadness of like COVID and not knowing like how things are going to be, and kind of feeling like a loss, and being able to pull that, like I said, between different ages, like as an older adult, you know, being able to go through it, and then kind of putting myself, like if I was 15 going through it, like what would that experience be like? So being able to like look at things and understand, like I said, really the sadness of feeling like maybe everything is lost, you know, and kind of writing from that perspective. And then how other people deal with it. You know, trauma could look different for different people, especially with guys. Like that's one thing I love about, like, trauma could look like anger, you know, and just manipulation from other people, you know, and all those things are things that people wouldn't necessarily look at it that way, but it is kind of part of mental health.
Yeah, I think like when you just said that, like trauma can look as anger. I mean, like with my own life, right? So, and people around me, I know people who are very angry, right, because of what their background, and I didn't even realize it until a later stage that, hey, you're behaving that way because of what happened to you. And sometimes you can't, like, you feel like, okay, I went through that, so I can get you to go through that. But people don't like to go through that at your pace, right? They need to go through at their pace, because it's like, you know, it's like leading a horse to water. That horse if he doesn't want to drink, she ain't gonna drink, right? So I think it's kind of interesting to you know, bring that sort of element to storytelling, especially in comics, because a lot of people, like I said, we don't come from, you know, professional backgrounds in writing. A lot of people who do, they tend to go to novels, right, or technical books, and advisory books, or mental health get well book type things. So what was it like, your first novel you said you wrote? What was that about? And, you know, what were the themes there that you wrote about?
Sure. So the novel was called Menace the Death Dealer. So it was a little bit of like an assassin spy type of story. So it's actually a little bit similar to like John Wick, before like John Wick came out. So it was like an assassin. Everything was kind of based around a casino. So and the character was named like Menace, and then it was like built around like the Ace of Spades and all that. And he would work out of a casino and get missions out of there. And like it has like a lot of stuff like martial arts and like globe-trotting stories. So, but the thing, even though I enjoyed it, I'm such a visual person. So even though I like writing the novel, I was like, I want to do comic books, because I have a vision and I like need to see it. And you know, when you write a novel, you kind of have to explain that to someone, and then they can take it, and which is good. They can create their own version, but sometimes I want people to see kind of what I am envisioning. So that's why I really wanted to do the comic book.
I think it probably also comes from the fact that you are a visual person, right? Because you've been raised on visual arts, like you said, comics since the 90s and so on. And that's, if that's part of you, it's easier to sort of want to see it rather than show it or tell it, I should say. Like, I mean, any given day I've got like novels packed up, wazoo up here in front of me, but every time I pick it up, I'm like, I should be writing, or I should be watching something else, because the discipline that I had I could say like in my 30s and younger years, I don't have any more to read like novels. We used to like read novels every day. Like I'll be like break and all that. But now I'm like, okay, let's get some visual stuff going on. I need to see some animation or stuff while I'm working, right? While I'm coloring. Because I think when you're reading a book, it's not as fast as if you're reading a comic book. You could read a comic book in like about 30 minutes, right? Or an hour. A novel would take you a week, depending on how fast of a reader you are. And so I think, but you're right, like if you're a visual person, you got to work in the visual medium. You can't try to, it's like pushing a rock up a hill, right? It's like, it's going to come back on you. And I guess you found that, but are you maybe that novel into a comic book in the future, right?
Yeah, I actually worked on a little bit of it, but that's something we could maybe talk about.
Did you molest? I was just thinking something might have been.
But yeah, I did like a little bit because so I originally I did my comic book independently, but before that I was working on a Menace comic book because I was really trying to just learn how to do comic books. So it's easy to kind of jump into things, but once again, I'm a visual person, and it's easier for me to show people my vision than to kind of just tell them. So part of it was like, let me learn how to do a comic book before I ever try to talk to a publisher. I need to know like what's it like working with an artist, creating panels, learning how to do like the logo and all those things. So when am working with someone else, like I have a better understanding of that process. And when we have conversations, I have better understanding like, what is that? What is an inker? Like how does that work? I was able to kind of work with all those people on my own. So that made it easier for me to kind of know my vision and to understand the process.
Yeah, it's really interesting to like, because I come from a film background, right? Like so I understand the format of how all that works, like, close up, medium close up, headshot, right? And all this stuff. But when you come to, when you try to work with people who haven't come from that background, like say an artist who's all he's known is like just doing the, comic strips or something. And I have professional artists sometimes asking me, or first time comic artists asking me, what does that mean? I'm like, this is so, I'll stand across a whole lot of, links and images saying this is how it's shot. And so, like when you do this page here, right? So when people look at that and go, well, what is that? Well, that's a wide shot, right? It's a wide shot and it's a kind of an angle, but also there's a airplane shot, right? Like from the top. And this is an inset. So that's an inset. People go, well, why are you putting it there? Well, because here's where there's nothing happening, so it's a good place to put that. But all your visual is coming from this top area here. Sorry, let me bring that. So so here, right? So you look down and look at the perspective. Everything is going here. Everything is lining up to, and there's a car here, but that car's on an angle going that way. So everything lines up. And a lot of people who are new to comics, especially writing or, even art, right? They don't really understand why the comic medium is as right away you can tell what works and what doesn't work, because they're so used to it. Because it's TV, watching TV and movies has made us understand how things work visually. And I think it's a good thing to always be learning. I mean, I'm always learning, right? I'm getting, left, right, and center. I'm learning all the time. Like you said, you can't be a creator without wanting to be willing to learn, right? So before I get to my question about learning about Egypt, which was my segue, I wanted to ask you about this. Did you, Everyday Meter says, did that push you out of your comfort zone, right? I think he's talking about the mental health, and going into writing novels and comics.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. I think probably before the pandemic, I kind of lived a very standard life. You kind of go to work, go home, go to sleep. And, I think I kind of got bored with that. And like I said earlier, it is hard sometimes. I think I learned that really through writing the novel of just like thinking of all these experiences. I'm like, how do I explain this if I haven't experienced this or anything near
Right.
it? Or, so you can do a lot of research online and try to learn, but it's different than just experiencing it and just being able to travel and go
Mm.
on, a plane and do all these things and being able to see different cultures and just,
Yeah.
talk to different types of people because it's easy to kind of be in your box. And then, if you're always in your box when you're telling your story will be in the box too, so
Yeah.
and even though it can be uncomfortable sometimes, I definitely learned like the benefits of kind of stepping out of my comfort zone. And I
Mm.
experienced a lot of good things from doing that and met a lot of great people and just really learned about things I just never thought of, through
Right.
doing these experiences.
So the next question, is researching Egypt. So what got you interested in Egypt, and why that country, right?
Yeah, I think part of it, like I said, I really like Blade, and then there's something that was always striking about, I think, like the Queen of the Damned movie with like Aaliyah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there was something about that that just kind of always stuck with me, and I was always like, man, I would love to make
Yeah.
like a story in ancient Egypt. So, and they just have really great like iconography, so that's just something. It's like when you see Egypt, you know it's Egypt. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you're able to play with that in ways that are very like comfortable, and you're like, oh, I get that. And then you can also play within a way you're like, I've never seen that mixed with that, So
Yeah.
I like the very striking images of just like ancient Egypt and then zombies, So one is like very like golden and polished and beautiful and rich, and then the other one is like dingy and dark and dirty and bloody. So I liked having like that distinction that I could play with that, And most of the pictures I tried to come up, you can usually see that distinction happening at the same time, and your brain usually doesn't see those things together. So I like to play with that.
I saw like some of the artwork, right, from like the previous, that you got made up and done for this is really great. I mean, we're going to be putting out some cards and some posters out from those, whereas everything else, the comic interior and cover A's and I think a cover B wraparound is new. But a lot of the covers, a lot of the colorful artwork that's already there, we're going to be reusing because they're brilliant. Because they're very well, they're really, really well crafted as a visual art. Like you look at this one here with just the way he's standing, and then you got like the kind of like the zombie or the dead, whatever, at the bottom here, just reaching up. It's just really cool. So I've got Rachel Traver Tava here asks, did you find music plays a part in your creative process?
That's a good question. I can say, especially when I was working on like the first novel, I was listening to like Kendrick Lamar, A Good Kid, Mad City. So, like I said, it was during the hurricane and we didn't have power, but I did have like music that I could use for a lot of times. So that was like
Yeah.
inspiration for me just because of seeing how a person, because I was just so bored at the time, but then being able to have music paint that picture for
Yeah.
me. And I was like, I want to do that. Like when I write something, I
Yeah.
really want to create that vision for people. And then just in the future when I'm bored and like I said, I work in Alaska and very remote place, and a lot of times technology is not always guaranteed. So the internet could be out at any time. So power can go out. So a lot of times, they also had like limited data, so you can't always rely on that. So music, you can usually like download it onto your phones. I usually would have music and I can just kind of sketch or write and just have music in the background and just kind of
Yeah.
help me to mellow out.
So now I want to head into like the actual story and the characters, because I think it's I find the characters engaging. I like because we did a lot, worked on a lot of the work going into this revised version, with new artists and everything. But I find that like it's such a core book with everything that's going around this, this family, right?
Mm.
They're still able to I know. Tell us about, I'll rather you tell us about how you wanted to why you focused on a family rather than just some superhero, some like macho hero type character, female or male or whatever, right?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to start in a place that was grounded and relatable. So, the gods or the vampires, they come in a little bit later into the story, but I really wanted to start with just kind of that human experience that we can all relate to. Just even being like a parent, being afraid of your child. So, for your child. And I think most people can relate to that, especially people who have kids, or just being worried about their future and their options. And, when they leave the house, will they come back? That could be a zombie story, but that could just be anyone, dealing with that issue and like that fear, and being able to, I think, represent that in a way that felt like authentic. Like I could see myself in that place, even if like the world around me isn't that same world. I can understand that fear that you can have as like a parent. And I think once you kind of get into that, then when some other fantasy elements come in, you're already hooked, into some of that, normal family stuff that we can all relate to.
I found it interesting because like when you add children or teenagers to a story, and you add parents, that you emotionally start being tied to that story, because you're thinking, you're going like, am I the teenager or am I the father, right? Because like who am I supposed to be like supporting here? Because or am I both, right? Can I see from both perspectives? Can I see from the dad's perspective on this? And I think a good story makes you want to think about all the characters and their behaviors. But in the end, you sort of end up, you do end up finding out who you would want to side with in any given time. I love the set of characters that you have. Like it's like so many elements, but they all move in sync, right? Because when I was reading it, I was going, well, okay, that works there, that works there, that works there, and all works really well to the final page, right? Here you go. Now we're ready for the next issue, and you kind of want that, and it's kind of episodic, but it's also like if you never bought the next issue, you still got a good idea of what was going on. And and the work that we're doing is basically, it's just going to continue page delivery every day, every other day, so that we can get this out there to people as quickly as possible. Now, one thing that we are going to take this to Kickstarter, and let me just bring up the link there. So if you guys, when we do, it'll be next year, right? Once we get all sorted out, that when we put it out there, that hopefully you'll support Steve's work and the work of the artist and myself as the editor and so forth. But we, one thing about this book is that we want the work done before we take it to Kickstarter. That's one of the things that we do with Plunge right now, is that we make sure everything is completed before we take to Kickstarter, because the reason for that is that we don't want to take people's money and wait for them, right? And the other thing here you got to understand is that Steve is actually paying out of pocket for this. So in that case, it's even more important that we get as many backers for this, because here's the thing about this, right? A lot of people take a book either unfinished or an idea to Kickstarter, and they don't back their own work. They don't put their own money in it. They don't support. They just expect everybody else to do it. So I love the vision that that Steve's brought to this, is that like, hey, I believe in my work, and I love the idea because that's like, I was talking about this on live stream yesterday about investing in yourself. Like a lot of us will buy everything. Like as you can see around me, we'll invest in other people's companies and buy their toys, their books, their magazines, their comic books. But when it comes to like putting into ourselves as comic creators, we don't really do that. So I think this is something that I've been struggling with myself, saying, well, why don't I start putting money into what we're producing, right? Buy a tablet, you know, pay for a colorist and all that, rather than just waiting for the, you know, take it to Kickstarter and make everybody pay for what I'm doing. So thank you, Steve, for doing that, because I think a lot more people, if they were doing what you're doing, a lot more people in crowdfunding would be happy with, you know, as backers, as supporters of that. So, you know, you've been working on this project for 10 years, right? Because I was, you know,
5 years, maybe probably 5.
yeah. So I was showing some artwork here. You know, you got a lot of artwork done, and you paid for all these artworks to be done. And this is why I thought, like, when we released these, you know, this project, that was, we'll get these work out across the 6 issues, right? Decide which ones will go with number 1, or number 2, and so on. And of course, we'll have, you know, because we've got a new artist, each cover A will have to be the artist cover, so that everybody knows that's the artwork inside, you know, because it's important that your first cover that you put out is a interior artist work. So tell us about the characters, right? I'm going to take this off, but like, tell us about, like, you know, we talked about Egypt and stuff, but tell us about creating these characters and how that, since, you know, you said that they're based on Egyptian gods and stuff.
Yeah.
How and why did you decide to base them around Egyptian gods?
You know, as a writer, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. So, you know, I think it's just how you interpret things that have already existed. And so having the characters that already existed and also being able to build in like the myth around that, as in, why would people think that they're gods? Well, they're actually vampires. So that's kind of a easy way to explain like why people would see them as that. And then, you know, it took a lot of time, I think, to kind of nail down what I wanted it to be visually, because I kind of pulled from a couple of different sources. Definitely like modern African cultures, you know, kind of showing that DNA of kind of how they dress, like modern fashion mixed with like some of like traditional fashion, and then also some like hip hop and like modern, and kind of fusing it together, but also making sure each character was distinct and had their own flavor. But then you can see it like, okay, I can see this on a runway, and I could see someone wearing this in real life, and like, oh, I'd want to wear that. Or if I was a vampire, I'd dress like that too. Kind of finding that balance.
I do like the design work. I mean, like, of the costumes and stuff, and you know, it's merging like merging modern America, and especially set in Washington, right? And the monuments there, and then merging it with ancient Egypt. One thing I was thinking, like if these gods are still around and yet they're vampires, they can survive. They're eternal, right? They can, because that gives you why they're eternal. Why they're still around is because they are vampires. They feed off the blood. Now, there are stories like this out there, but what I found was really interesting, why I wanted to, you know, work on this with you, was that it's the idea of like Egyptians and vampires, right? And the idea, and then you chuck in like the other stuff with the zombies, with being something a bit more different. And I think more power. Yeah. Thank you, Ronto. So I think you know, when I looked at it, I was like, this book has so much potential to be really, really good, to be really to have a lot more eyes on it than normally should, because the idea behind it is really good, and I think I love the concept, and that's what really attracted me to it. I was like, yo, this is really smart, and like the you know, because a lot of times you look at like plot lines and you look at concepts. Okay, why do this way? Where does it? What is going to make it interesting to people who are reading, right? Yeah. If this is on the shelf, right? If this book is on the shelf, and people open it and they go, well, okay, because it's like the 3-second rule or something, you know, because you're just walking past and go, and so you got to be able to grab people's attention right away, and when I looked at the plots and concept, I was like, I like this. And so that's why I'm so glad to be working with you on this, man. And having our, you know, our Italian artist bring his style, man, it's been so good to have Francisco, you know, bring in a different style to people, you know, to comics, right? That people aren't used to. Because if you look at this, the line work is totally different to what, you know, everybody, you know, is normally used to, because, you know, we're so used to, like in American comics, so used to like you know, Jim Lee, you know, Michael Turner, Todd McFarlane, and so on, right? Magnola. One thing I notice about, and I do, you know, because I've had Francisco work with me on another project, is that his line work is very, you know, in a way, not trying to put it down anyway, but actually lift it up. I like it because it's got that dirty look to it. You know, it's got this really rugged look to it that really suits this book. You know, because the zombies are like, you know, they're rotting and stuff, and so you want the line work not to be nice and clean, like a, you know, like a Superman line work, right? You don't want to be nice and clean, and just having that sort of style come to it made it become elevated the work even further, because I think a lot of people don't realize how important the actual you know, when I say line work, I mean stuff like this. You know, it's like a style, like how all this works the way it works, right? All these drawn things, so you can see how it moves around the page to make it look more realistic, not just you know, like like it's, you know, it's like nice and clean. And then you've got here, which gives us this animated look, the line work here. So you this is I'm zooming in quite a lot, but like, so it's pixelated, but you can see how it's animated. This is like your superhero art style or your Batman comic book, right?
Yeah.
But also, it also gives you, if you want to go that way, it allows you to go that way as well. And so it gives you that clean look, and then it gives you this other look of realism that, you know, someone, you know, it's just, I think that when we get the colors in here, people are going to get blown away. You know, because a lot of times people just see the line black and white and go, oh yeah, but then the tones and the green and the grays and the lime and the olive on the skin of a zombie, man, the layering of that can really you know, lift up the work itself. Now, you're doing 6-issue first arc. Have you, you know, what's the next arc after that? Have you already started work on that, or are you just working issue by issue at the moment?
I have like the 6-issue arc in mind. I have a longer term story that I'm seeding. You know, I really would like to get into some fantasy, some stuff, and just really, I think, go into like the creative parts and other dimensions and other things. But I do want to kind of build up to a lot of that.
You're not thinking about like Stargate, are you, with this going on to Stargate sort of other dimensions?
I didn't know much about Stargate until I was doing my research, and I was like, this is actually some, and like I said, nothing new is under the sun. So, you know, there are a lot of ideas that can be, you know, paralleled. So I was like, oh, this is not exactly what I'm doing, but I was like, okay. And the funny thing is kind of a lot of the, like the costuming, like if you like that Anubis that's in the background, I think I have like a very similar idea of kind of the armor that looks like, you know, the Egyptian hieroglyphics. You know, I really tried to make that, once again, to make everything feel like it's like it all makes sense, like this is really happening, you know. So finding that realism, even though it's like a fantasy world that isn't real, but I wanted to bring a lot of realism to it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting if you know, just like if you go past the 6-issue, and there's so much you can do, right? You can go backwards as well. You can do a prequel, like what was life for them way back in ancient times, and then you can say, well, how about like another 100 years later? What happened? Who survived and what happened? And then you can say, well, now they built ships and they got out of the planet and they're taking it, you know, elsewhere. Now, Danita is asking, Danita Morris, who's asking, which of your characters feels most like an echo of yourself, if any?
Ooh,
That's a good
that's
question.
a question. I don't know if there's anyone directly. I think I've related to a couple of characters, like you said,
Mm,
like the main father in the story. Like I related to him a lot during the pandemic. I also related to the son of just being a
yeah,
son, and growing up, and having rules
yeah,
and being told you can do and can't do certain things, and it's because of your
yeah,
for your safety, and being able to kind of see it from both ends, and also just once again feeling like the loss of just like, hey, I can't do what I want to do. And I really
yeah,
like the part where just kind of like the father thinking about like the son, and also thinking about like, hey, I had these opportunities of like in my world growing up, and like you won't have those opportunities. And like that
yeah,
felt really sad to me. And I could just see that like all of us just feeling
mm,
like, hey, my child has less options than I do, you know. And then, you could feel
yeah,
that way. I know some people feel that way in this world right now, you know what I mean? And you
yeah,
can feel that, like every day can feel like it's very chaotic. And I think a lot of the characters, a fun thing about using the Egyptian gods is a lot of them, they have not a set personality, but there is some stuff to work on from the myths. So I could
yeah,
kind of create the characters based off of that, and then put my own twist on that. And a lot of the characters, I think I put a little bit of myself in a lot of them. Sometimes like this is what I would do in that situation, or I wouldn't do this,
yeah,
but I could see why they would do that, and kind of making it feel authentic. So there's a lot of characters. I think even like the queen in the story of a little bit of being thrown into a situation where maybe she's been around for a long time, but she was never necessarily leading certain things.
yeah,
So, leadership position, which I am sometimes at work as a supervisor, being able to like, okay, what's it like the first time you were a leader, and having
yeah,
to like answer the questions and make the hard decisions, which is, because it's easy to say when you're not the leader to say, hey, you should do this and you shouldn't do that. But when you're actually
yeah.
the leader and you actually have to make the decision and deal with the consequences and deal with the people's personalities, it's different being kind of in the driver's seat.
That's true. Now, what was it like? You're from Jersey. Jersey's the one place, right? I think in
Uh,
Jersey Shore, there's a beach
all,
area, and all that stuff. So, what was it like working over in Alaska?
it was definitely has been a great experience. I mean,
Sorry,
it's
did you catch
very
that?
cool. And I said it's been a great experience. Well, New Jersey has like all 4 seasons, so we do have like a winter, but it's that's different than what it's like being in
Right.
sub temperatures, you know what I mean? So, I've learned about a lot of cultures, so there's a lot of native
Mm,
cultures out there. So being able to understand them and
yeah,
seeing how some of, my background parallels to theirs, and then just once again, being able to
yeah,
see the art. So I've collected a lot. I like to collect
mm,
masks. So I collect like, I have like probably like 15 masks from like Alaska, and just like a
that's
whole
pretty
bunch of
awesome.
so I started doing that like towards
Yeah,
the pandemic, and just being able to have access to that, and just all the kinds of artwork
mm,
that they have. Like you can see some stuff on my wall
yeah,
back there, so just all the different types of art. And then even within the state there are multiple cultures, so seeing how one culture in one
yeah,
region, how their art could be similar but different from another culture, which kind of plays into
yeah,
all the stuff that I'm working with in my story.
yeah. I think deep down, like all primitive cultures have a singular, kind of like they all are the same. And I
Mm,
think that's the great thing about humanity. If you
mm,
really take away all the other things, we deep down we are one people, right? Or one
yeah.
DNA, really. And I was because when I was like because when I was studying art way back in 94, 5, 6, um, I was looking at Pacific Island art, right? Traditional Fiji art, and then going into Mayan art, Aztecs, and then American, right? Central America and so on, and like, North America, and then also Inuit art.
Mm,
The movement is very similar in how things are represented,
yeah.
and the line work, like we are talking about line work before, it thickens as it goes further up. You notice that like there's wider versions when like the jaw lines would be wider, whereas like it's down south here in the Pacific Islands, it'd be thinner. And you'd be like, what is that? Well, that's because they've got friggin' bears and stuff, and they got whales and all this stuff. So, they're kind of going off that natural what they see there. Out here, we're seeing pigs and goats and, and humans and nothing like that, or just fish, not the whales and stuff, and turtles, right? So there's more turtles here, whereas the opposite of that, you'd have like dolphins or whales up in the north. It's interesting, like people always seem to draw what they see, and like us, we're talking about the story that with your research and stuff and your experiences as a mental health professional, and people always say, write or do what because then it becomes more natural. And I think a lot of people try to imagine them as something else and try to bring that in, and it feels unnatural. So I think what I liked about it is that the story feels natural and the characters feel natural. And I think that, like you said, has to be down to your experiences by actually moving out of your own comfort zone, I guess, and then going to Alaska where there's totally different people, like, because, it's a totally different culture, Inuits, right? Indigenous people there, but also all the other people that go there for work. Right, a lot of Americans go there for work. What was it like for you to come from Jersey and be in that sort of environment and try to acclimatize to the environment? Right? Did you go, I know what I'm doing because this is what I've studied, or did you have to change yourself to suit your environment? Because I know it depends how it is, right? But how was it for you?
I mean, I think I tend to be a person that listens more before I speak. And I think that helped a lot because it's easy to go somewhere and feel like, well, since I'm going there in a support role, like I have all the answers and, I know how to do this and that. But it was important for me to listen and learn, especially when you're going to a different culture and showing a respect to another culture and, showing that I can learn from you as much as you might be learning from me. And for me to be successful in working with you, I need to understand you and understand your experience and your culture and your background and little things of like why you do this and not do that. It's important for me to know that so I can help you. And then being able to just learn because, every culture has their own lessons and even their own way of telling stories. So like, a lot of indigenous cultures, they're big on storytelling, which I really appreciated, and kind of the lessons that you can pull from them and being able to understand like that wisdom and, also kind of respecting like the elders of a community. And I think it's something that may not be as much in our culture, I think in the American culture, but that is something that is different, something that is honored. So, and also just kind of being in the moment of, hey, I'm hunting, so I'm still hunting for my food. Like I'm still catching whales, so just kind of being in the moment. And, as a therapist, sometimes you're thinking of like, hey, you have to plan for the future and kind of, even though you're talking about living the moment, but then it's also like, people are thinking about like, hey, I'm thinking about today, I'm not necessarily thinking about 6 weeks from now. Like I have to think about in the moment. So being able to find that balance of, that mindfulness of being in the moment and kind of thinking about today, even though I know I still have to plan for the future.
Yeah. What was like, did you, talking about culture, were you able to get out to, the tribes and go spend time with them? Going, like you mentioned, like going fishing, for hunting for food, right? Did you, spend time with that there, or was it a bit out of your way?
I mean, it's a little bit of both. So when I first went out there, I actually went out there in 2020. So it just happened to be as literally April 2020 I went out there.
Right.
Literally, I wasn't even sure if I was even going to be able to go. I was on a plane with like 3 people, I think, and I was like, is this going to happen? So when I ended up going, a lot of things were shut down. So early on when I was out there, I wasn't, even though I was, I was in the rural communities. So I was seeing people, but then also you just weren't talking to people that much, and a lot of it's like you're masked. You know, you weren't
Yeah.
able to move around freely. So probably in the last year or two, I was able to do some more stuff and, you know, see more people and, you know, travel around a little bit more comfortably.
All right. So as we close in here, close down here, I just want to give you some time to sort of like impart, you know, what I call the words of wisdom, right? You get about 3 to 5 minutes to say what you want to say as an advice to someone who's writing for the first time, someone who's trying to get into comics, or just life in general, right? What you've experienced, you know, working with cultures and stuff. Anything that you think would be really, you know, something you want to leave our audience with. Now, I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about that. And while we're doing that, I'm going to show a bit more of the work here. So let me bring this up. So as you can see here, all the pages have been planned out. The entire book is planned out, and of course lettered, and some here, you know, we're getting set up again, but this is the entire book. First issue, I should say. It is, where's my numbers here on the page count? Hold on. Yeah, it's a 32 page, but there's a couple more pages we got to put in there. So it'll be about 36 pages, including the info page, right? So, and the back cover. So there'll be a 36 page comic book. And as you can see here, you know, what are we, like 28 pages for the first issue? Yeah, 28 pages for the first issue. So it's kind of a bumper first issue. And we're already up to about 7 pages in, already inked, but I haven't arranged it here. So as you can see, these are all like what we call like page setups, which gives you more detailed, rather than just mock-up, it's more set up with like more details and shows you exactly where everybody's going to be. And then it's a rough outline. And then the next stage is to actually draw it in pencil, right? Let me just bring it up here. Actually, I think I might have it on this page. Let me just give you a sec. So you can see the stages. And oh no, I think let me just check this. There you go. So you can see that here, right? So there's your rough outline, and then you can see the completed work here. So if you're first time getting into comics, you got to plan it out so it works, because then, you know, you can send it to the art director and they can have a look at it and say, well, yeah, this works, this doesn't work, or whatever, and so on. And as you can see here now, you know, how everything is set up. Of course, now we got to take it to the colorist and have the colorist color it. I can't wait to see the colors pop on this, man. This is going to be such a cool, like this page alone's got so many zombies, you know, there's got cars, houses, you know, buildings, walls, just this. I love this page. It's such a well-designed page. All right, back to Steve. So I'm going to give you the 5 minutes, as long as you want to take. So words of wisdom, and we'll come back and we'll finish up after that. Thank you everyone for watching. We're not over yet, but we'll.
Words of wisdom. I would just say, you know, just through my experience, I think listening is a very active skill that I think a lot of people
Steve,
don't do.
Steve, I think you're muted or something on your side.
Can you hear me?
There's no sound.
I haven't done anything. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No?
Weird. I hope it's not. Hold on. Let me check my audio again. Huh. Try now. It might be my side. Don't know what happened. Say something, bro.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Weird. Let me mute you and then put you back on.
Hello?
Okay. Not sure what's going on there. Audio check.
Hello.
Try that. No.
No.
Okay, try again. Chet, can you tell me if you can hear Steve? Could be just me on my end.
Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Cool. Okay, I'll let him finish. I continue, but I think it might be just on my end. I'm not sure what's up. All right, Steve, take it away, mate.
All right. So for my words of wisdom, I think I was saying just, I think being an active listener, and I think kind of being in the moment, and I think allowing yourself to fail, which I think can be hard a lot of times. And I think when you're creative and you're working on something, you have to not be sensitive. So you have to kind of, as we talked about earlier, just kind of be out of your comfort zone. And that is not always easy for me. So being able to allow people to see my art and my work and to critique it and know that everyone's not going to like it. And, the audience that it's for will find it. And also just knowing that you have to put a lot of work and effort into anything that you're doing if you want to be successful, because it's not going to just come to you. So, as you're saying, I would always do 110% of something if I'm going to do it, or I'm not going to do it at all. So, if you love something, it can't just be love. It also has to be work and time and effort. So, you know, um, anything that you want to do, you just have to put your best foot forward in it. And, you will see the results. And sometimes it takes time. Like I've said, I've been working on this for over 5 years, and now it's slowly coming together, and I could give up and kind of forgot about it, or continue to work on it and put my own money into the art, just because I know quality is important, and I can't you know scrimp on the quality, because I want people to feel like this is the best thing that they've seen. It's something that they've never seen before. And if they put their money towards it, that they feel like it's worth the money. So those are my words of wisdom.
All right. So I couldn't hear any of that, but I got the end of it because I jumped onto YouTube to hear you speak. So hopefully you guys will forgive me for that. I have no idea what went on. I checked everything, but I still couldn't hear it. So, but I got the YouTube. So yeah, you're right. You can't skimp on the art because it's a visual medium, and this is something that I try to stress, because like even my first one I put out, I wasn't happy with the art, so I got somebody else to do the artwork, because it's a visual medium and people will judge you on it. And I think it's important that when you're putting and if you believe in the work, like I said, you got to invest in the work, and however you do that, it's up to you, right? However you try to work out with the artist and whoever else you're working with. But with that said, I'm not going to be able to hear you any more of you, but so I'm going to finish off here. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Danita. Thank you, Robert, and everybody else. I can see you watching. Thank you, watching on Facebook, on Twitter, and of course here on YouTube. Thank you, and hopefully you'll support us in the long run as well. Please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And if you've got any questions, leave a comment. And later, if you come along and watch this later, and I'll pass it on to Steve. And because hey, we want to be able to connect with you guys going forward, because all these projects we work on, we do put our heart and soul into it. As Steve said, right? He's done a lot of research on this. He's stepped out of his own little comfort zone to learn a bit more about people and so on. And so thank you guys, and of course thank you, Andre. So for everybody else watching elsewhere around the world, thank you for your time, and thank you for watching The Monkey Show. I am Aru, the Monkey King of Zealandia, and thank you for your time. Wherever you are, be well, be safe, and have an awesome day. And Steve, thank you, and we'll see you on the chats.
Thank you, everyone.
Ka kite anō, everybody. Have fun. Have a great day. Steve, any last words?
Just thank you, everyone, for being here and just listening to me talk. And, you know, I can't wait for everyone to see the story when it's done.
Bye, everyone. Ka kite anō. Catch you next time. Thank you for your time.
Nope. Can't stay here anymore. I gotta get back. I think this was the spot. Oh Lord, I beseech thee, please return me to my old life. I swear I'll do anything. Like, literally anything. And I won't bother you again, so pretty please bring me back to life.